So thank you and welcome everyone to today's Inspire webinar, Intersectional Crossroads in Urban versus Digital Participation. Just want to obviously first thank colleagues and also everyone online for making the time to join us today for a very interesting webinar, and very glad to be joined by colleagues from Platonique who will be leading and taking us through many of the interesting contents and sections of the workshop today. Just in terms of obviously a bit of a background, obviously today we'll be focusing on particularly exploring the intersections between looking at digital platforms and e-democracy platforms and the way that we think about this in terms of in connection to intersectionality, but also in terms of the political cultures that we operate within. And obviously we're going to be going through and looking at the way that we can kind of unpack these intersections between the ways that participation and democracy kind of work in relation to the way that we think about this in the digital space, and also in terms of particularly the way that this kind of experience is navigated by political users. I think otherwise, just to say thank you again, everyone, for making the time for this webinar today, and I will hand over to Olivier to start us off.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That's a very nice intro. Just to add to that, we'll particularly look today at how local cultures shape and impact the use and inclusiveness of digital platform. And I'll present in a second. I will present the team and our fabulous guest today. So one of the main issues we're talking here, we have provided as citizens with a bunch of new participatory platforms from a huge amounts of cities. Citizen assemblies are organized all over. Participatory budgeting gets really like more than a trend these days. But we might think at some point, are these tools really inclusive? Or do we, at the end of the day, design all these new tools with lots of capacities and probably an operational design that doesn't respond always to the needs of specific citizens, and I'm thinking specifically of marginalized communities using or not this platform, and why. So this is basically the question is, are we designing new tools basically to keep on with the same old politics? So that's not something we want, but that's something we may observe. So just to let you know, this is part of the Inspire project series of webinars, and as Platonique Foundation I'm representing here today with my colleague Nadia, we have a specific role on looking at what we call digital culture. So the idea is that we have two objectives. The first one is expand digital participation, including the less engaged communities. And the second one would be to develop cultural sensitive or inclusive approaches to online deliberation models. So you see on the left a very nice interpretation of what digital participation may represent as a way of navigating a city or a very complex journey or a path for citizens. So today in the menu, since it's time to have a meal usually at that time, so we prepare the menu, and that's food for thought completely for you. So we after this welcome and framing, we look very quickly at what we call urban genealogies of participatory online participatory platforms. We gave a name to that concept. We call PUX, or a bit of a variation of what user experience is. We call it political user experience. We'll tell more about this. Then we'll be looking through the lens of intersectionality and what we call the paradox of the digital intersectionality, which is basically where is the balance point between intersectional insight and privacy rights. And we'll be discussing with our guest, Denas and Titas, with the dialogue facilitated by Nadia in a minute. So I'd like to mention this is a teamwork. I'd like particularly to say hello to my colleague Nadia, researcher and designer at Platonique Foundation. So Nadia, hi, you want to introduce your guest and let us know what to expect from your section?
Yeah, hi, I'm Nadia Nadesan, and I will give a short presentation about intersectionality and some digital paradoxes around data. And so part of our team today is Titas Biswas, a sociologist and media film scholar who works on intercultural women and local governance impact in our Irish pilot. And then we have Dena Arya, a researcher focusing on intersectional methodological, I'm like getting ahead of myself, and analytical approaches to exploring youth and climate action. And she works on the youth employment in the West Midlands pilot in the UK. And we have our fearless leader, Sonia Busu, who is an associate professor in public policy at the University of Birmingham. And so I will give a short presentation, and then I will have a little bit of a talk with Titas and Dena about their pilots and their work on intersectionality and safer spaces. And then we will have open the conversation to the audience. But before we get started, we do have a Menti meter. We'll have
not yet. We have to
Sorry.
wait a little bit, and it's just a bit of a suspense. It's part of the, political user experience. We need to wait for, it's a kind of a drama happening around that type of webinar. Anyway, I'll dig in a little bit on what we call political user experience in online participation, which is a result of an official deliverable of the Inspire project, not yet being reviewed or validated by the Commission. That means we almost ready. It's in the box. We have a series of papers and articles to be published on each of the chapters. So that will be published as soon. Hopefully, by the time we publish the recording of this webinar, we'll have all these deep dives published. So basically, I'll tell a little bit more of one or two chapters of this deliverable, and again looking at the democracy platform and how the design of these platforms are very connected with urban development models as well as political cultures of specific cities. So it constitutes design urban development models or trends like design justice constitutes what we could call an urban assemblage of participation. So this is an overview of what we let's say the deliverable is about. We're looking at jumping from as I was mentioning, from UX to PUX, expanding the idea of user experience into political culture and institutional trust, not just interface design. Nadia will get deeper into it. We're also looking at platform genealogies, so exploring design roots and how cities shape participatory experience, and how these open source platforms may travel in different cities, and how local culture or local political culture may influence the redesign or the adaptation of this platform, and how far. So that's what we call exporting online assemblages. Unfortunately, we won't get deep into it, but it's also important to look at, let's say, the legacy of the digital platforms, and maybe reclaiming the right to citizens, that their participation, their online interactions, even emotions online or comments or proposals may not be deleted if there's a change of power in the city or government running this platform. And we've been seeing this happening, some kind of unplugged political decision, which basically should be absolutely illegal. We're also looking at, as part of this exploration, how these platforms, participation platforms, are not very well prepared for crisis and civic resilience. In the case of natural disaster, organizing volunteers, for example, they are absolutely not designed very well for that. So talking about a bit further about this idea of assembling urban and digital participation, we call this, we look at the platforms in the city, just like democracy in code, as we call it. So we particularly analyze the case of two platforms I will just mention today, but we'd have to add up to what we imagine as the infrastructure of a city, which we always would think like water pipes, electricity, and transport. We'd have to add the participatory platforms powered by data and software as a way that they emerge as what we call critical infrastructures, but they're adding to the assemblage of these governmental or institutional infrastructure we as citizens may use to get more advocacy or to get more power. So it's basically looking at this digital infrastructure not for logistics but for democracy itself. So we're looking in our research, particularly in how these two platforms, the Cinemen Council, have been rising up from Spain, very connected with the 15M movements and progressist and municipalist movement. So it has a lot to do with the very specific Spain techno-political cycle, and it was so rich that two platforms were just born together at the same time. And we look at how the city was developing through a community-led deliberative ecosystem, ensured in a tradition of politics, grassroots politics in Barcelona, while Consul in Madrid was emerging from more centralized, what we call fast deployment model in Madrid, focused on direct voting or direct democracy and ease of replication. I'd particularly get into the Decidim, not in detail, but just to let you know, the Decidim is a platform that was designed by the city of Barcelona to create a digital platform for democratic processes with strong ethical principles, and we'll let you know what the bottlenecks are of having such straightforward ethical principles. Just a number should be reminded here. There's actually more than 500 cities and local governments and cooperatives and social organization using the code of the Decidim. So talking about how these assemblages export, I think it's very interesting to look at them. What we're particularly interested in, and I hope some architects are looking at this webinar recording, is a very simple questions. Are digital architecture shaped in the image of the city and the culture, or political culture, where they are designed or implemented? Since we're based in Barcelona, I will only talk about Decidim these days. I mentioned Decidim, but it's interesting to look at the Decidim is very well related with a reform and expansion of the city of Barcelona in the 16th century, called the Plan Cerda, which followed the criteria of what is called technically the hippodamic plan, with a grid structure that you can see on the left of the picture. And really, Cerda's utopia was what he called spatial democracy, so democracy from space. Urban space where every citizen had the same rights of circulation and inhabitation. Yet, as you can see on the right, or you can guess, the rigid geometry of the plan often produces friction when people navigating the real space. So you can see on the right. So this tension in Barcelona between what we call egalitarian design and experiential friction is not limited to the physical aspect of the city. It somehow extends to its digital infrastructures, right? So in the same way, Decidim's clear structure can make participation feel too controlled. It offers fairness and access, but not always ease or flow, which is repeating the city's mix of, as I was mentioning, equality and rigidity, which is very representing what Barcelona's politics and urban culture is. But I would add to that, generally, when you look at the participation platform, not only the city, and you do how they export, you'll see that probably bias in the original design of this institutional product repeats itself in different cities. And basically, this is what we call the navigating platform like cities syndrome. There's too much text. It's only text. So basically, you have the feeling that institutions or governments want citizens to basically fill their boxes, right? So you have a feeling of the citizen when you talk with citizens that use the type of platform, that they think that all these online assemblies, different phases, complexities among the operational design feels like corridors, right? Or they are overlapping layers of administrative categories, long blocks of text, procedural thresholds, and unclear entry points feel like entering the real, city council building when you have a political proposal to make. It's very interesting to feel, this feeling of richness as overload. So there's so much structure and so little intuitive flow. That's a little bit of the diagnostic we can make right now. And this is basically also the clever design behind the Decidim is about this operational design for participation, combining participatory spaces and components. It's like a real puzzle, but it's not easy to administrate for someone who's not an institution, right, or not working at an institution. So it should be something like a public libraries of possibilities, with lots of treasures to discover. But in fact, it's basically over-designed. So we ask and force people to work only on text, and sometimes it's not even translated. So talking about the most affected communities or marginalized communities, there's really an issue of political user experience. They're not recognizing themselves into the front end the platform offers, just if what like a big official city building. So how can we change this perspective of feeling? So basically what we're looking at how the city, particularly our consul, export in different cities. And we've been analyzing Barcelona, Helsinki, and a very fast evolution of the city in Brazil. What needs to be retained is that most of the time design elements of the choice of these modules that are developed are basically a signal of dynamics and institutional discomfort with open processes. So you can see sometimes when we talk about participatory budgeting, this is most of the cities are reducing participation to this the less complicated or the less, let's say, influential, I would say, participatory scheme compared to what a citizen initiative could be, which is basically about asking governments for referendums on citizen initiatives. So that doesn't happen as much as we'd like to see. So if we'd like to find an opposition to this idea of the platform are designed like the cities exactly, or they're very official buildings, what about seeing the participatory platforms or the political experience we want to get out of them? Is looking at platforms as a food market. So we have any type of foods. You don't even need to talk to feel emotions, right? You don't need to speak a specific language. It's really seeing that I love tacos and it's time to eat. So this is an example, but you could expand this metaphor to other types of food. But basically, it's the design of these platforms is the wrapper. So the design of participatory platforms, I'm talking about policy, digital tools that shape how accessible and inclusive political participation should be. And if the wrapper is flawed, as we have seen in many examples, so if it's rigid, exclusionary, or poorly structured, even if the operational design is a perfect puzzle, it's too complicated and it limits the capacity of political engagement. And if you see what's in it, so the ingredients, the filling of this taco should be politics, like citizen bottom-up politics. So just like the main ingredients in a taco define its taste, the core of participatory democracy is who participates, how decisions are made, and what power dynamics exist. So in the base, ingredients are inequitable or exclusionary, the entire system will fail marginalized communities, and the dish will be something no one will want to eat or have a conversation around. So I think that's kind of the type of metaphor that we need to talk with when we think of improving user experience with marginalized communities. I'd like to mention there's this ingredient I'm presenting now from the city called the social contract. Is one of the most clever decisions that has been made. So it's called the social contract. It's basically it's a social contract between the users and institution running the platform. But it can also seen as some kind of a social contract on the top of the open license, which may prevent, or in a case of far-right communities using Decidim as an open source tool, they may be chased and basically not allowed to do it because there's this social contract existing. The social contract is based on what we call transparency, traceability, and integrity requests or features, and it's very the base of the ethical design of Decidim. But, and that's the but, for us as practitioners, academics, trying to analyze all the power or the influence of these platforms through an intersectional lens, it's absolutely almost impossible if you cannot do data scrapping and interpreting it, which may also create more bias than expected. So there's really intersectional barriers on race, gender, and class accessibility that shape who can access and meaningfully this type of participation platform. We look with Nadia, Dena, and Titas the aspect of data. So the intentional data is often absent or anonymized to meet legal standards, creating a paradox between privacy and equity. There's an issue around the translation and readability, and Nadia will let us know about how we can learn from feminist, anti-racist, and disability justice frameworks to expose these design bottlenecks and propose more inclusive alternatives. And partly the dialogue we want to have with Dena and Titas is about where to go next. That would be it for me. I'm thinking, Nadia, not to use the Mentimeter because I'm not sure how many people are in the room. We may jump directly into your section and the dialogue. Before we do that, I'd like to let you know that we basically talking about food. We're basically cooking what we call a crash course around this idea of intersectional participation and political user experience. This will be launched in May. So hopefully that webinar also serves for a double check and kind of a small co-creation and dialogue issue to help us design better this crash course And if you're interested, Stefan will also share the links in the chat.